In late October in Charlotte, North Carolina, an incident within the local police department shook the community and raised serious questions and fear amongst the people. It was a case that had never been heard of before in that very district. After thorough investigation, a case that is now referred to as the Charlotte Affair incident sprung up. It was a murder case, one that was so brutal that it shook the entire police department. At the center of the case were two highly respected officers whose involvement shook everyone. There was more to Detective Rick Dalton and Sergeant Kevin Miles than met the eye, a hidden connection that set fate into motion. On the night of the incident, routine activities at the Charlotte Police Department were interrupted by an unforeseen confrontation. Both Rick and Kevin had long been recognized for their professionalism and dedication. However, behind the public facade, the two men were involved in a forbidden affair. No, this was not just something that they could hide or pretend like it wasn't serious. The affair would end their careers, and the pressure to keep such a relationship hidden was immense. As internal sources later revealed, the relationship had been maintained with great care and utmost secrecy, and not even their closest family members had an idea that they were together in the beginning. It was a deep secret, yet as the affair deepened, so too did the fear of exposure and the potentially devastating consequences that would follow if their personal lives were made public. Investigators soon discovered that tension had been mounting for weeks prior to that fateful night. Their colleagues had observed subtle changes in both men's behavior. For example, Rick, once calm and steady, began exhibiting signs of anxiety and withdrawal. Some of his colleagues stated that he just seemed like he had too much on his mind all of a sudden, while his affair partner and co-worker Kevin had suddenly gone quiet. At first, no one was smart enough to realize the weird behaviors they exhibited meant something greater. On the night in question, surveillance footage captured a brief shadowed exchange in a private corridor near the evidence room. Although the footage was grainy, it showed Rick and Kevin meeting alone in an area where few officers would normally stay to chat. Though it seemed like a normal meeting that couldn't possibly raise alarm, what happened next would forever change the lives of those involved. In a moment that investigators later described as a sudden reaction, a single shot was fired. The sound of the gunshot filled the corridor, and within seconds, Sergeant Kevin Miles collapsed. It was an unusual occurrence for the police station. Of course, it was a sudden call for alarm, and everyone had their guards up. What could have possibly caused that? The other officers thought it was an intruder, but it was a deliberate and calculated measure taken by Detective Rick Dalton. But what caused him to end his colleague affair partner's life? Digital forensic analysis played a crucial role in piecing together the timeline of events in order to get to the bottom of the unfortunate case. Investigators recovered records from Rick's phone that revealed a series of deleted messages and altered timestamps. Yes, there were actually deleted messages there, which meant that he had something to hide. The communications, once they were finally uncovered, revealed a trail of secret meetings between the two officers. The messages themselves were cryptic and suspicious, but they hinted at a much larger effort to keep things under wraps. Phrases like "keeping everything hidden" jumped out, suggesting that the officers were taking deliberate steps to conceal their actions. It soon became clear that this wasn't just a matter of deleting evidence of their relationship. The tampering with digital records indicated a broader effort to cover up details that might expose other irregularities or wrongdoings within the department. The officers' attempts to erase their digital footprints seemed to be part of a larger strategy to avoid detection and accountability. The internal investigation, headed by Lieutenant Sandra Monroe, proceeded with a high level of urgency and meticulous attention to detail. Over the course of several weeks, a dedicated team of investigators, digital forensic experts, and internal affairs officers worked to reconstruct the events leading up to the shooting. Interviews with colleagues, analysis of digital footprints, and reviews of security footage gradually revealed a pattern that pointed to a premeditated effort to silence a potential whistleblower. While Rick had long maintained a spotless professional record, the mounting evidence indicated that he had become trapped between the desire to protect his private life and the realization that his continued secrecy might expose not only the affair, but also other sensitive issues within the department. The discovery of a leather-bound notebook belonging to Sergeant Kevin made things even more complicated. The notebook was found with his personal things and contained handwritten notes. Kevin had been writing down his thoughts about problems within the department over several months. It seemed like Kevin thought some investigations could put him or others at risk. He might have been planning to share his findings publicly. The more investigators read, the more it seemed like Kevin had uncovered something important. But even after the investigators tried to look into detail and seek more clarity on that part of the case, they just kept arriving at a dead end, and it seemed like he had just been making up things in his head. The investigators stressed that they did not find any cases of corruption in the department, and it felt like Kevin was just so stressed with the relationship and being paranoid over hiding the truth that he felt like everyone was out to get them. This theory was later proven to be true after a series of investigations, which would later be revealed in the case, suggested that there was no such case of corruption or any other hidden agenda. News of the shooting soon spread beyond the confines of the police station. Local media outlets began reporting on the incident with a mix of shock and a suspicious eye on departmental practices. In televised segments and print reports, news anchors detailed the emerging narrative. To them, a well-respected officer had been caught in a secret and forbidden relationship that resorted to violence in a desperate attempt to prevent the truth from emerging. The story went big, and some retired law enforcement officials weighed in on the broader implications. Some people noted that such incidents proved that there was a lot going on behind closed doors. But apart from the conspiracy theories and possible involvement of other parties, investigation suggested that the two officers had more troubles in their relationship. There had been fire on the mountain before the tragic incident. Kevin, known for his honesty and straightforward nature, began to feel that the constant lying was taking its toll. He started to believe that the truth had to come out. He thought that if they could be open about who they were, they might finally free themselves from the fear and the double life they had been forced to live. In his private journal and another simple text message sent to Rick, he expressed his growing desire to let the truth be known. One message, later recovered from his phone, read plainly, "I can't keep living like this. We need to tell someone." Rick, however, was terrified of that outcome. He had worked hard to build a spotless image as a dedicated officer and believed that any hint of personal misconduct would end his career. In his own messages, he repeatedly warned, "We must keep this secret. If anyone finds out, everything will fall apart." Rick's fear was clear in every word. For him, the idea of exposing their relationship was not just about personal embarrassment. It was about the very real possibility of losing everything he had worked for. Over the weeks leading up to the incident, colleagues in the department began to notice subtle changes, just like I mentioned earlier. Some remarked that Rick seemed more anxious than usual, and he was often seen checking his phone, stepping away from group conversations, and appearing lost in thought. Others noticed that Kevin, who was usually straightforward, suddenly became increasingly troubled, as if the burden of their secret was weighing him down. Although no one knew the full story, there was an unspoken understanding among those who worked closely with them that something was not right at all. But then again, no one was smart enough to realize that the two of them acting up meant something. The situation became more complicated on that particular night in October. According to the recovered digital evidence and the statements of officers who were nearby, Rick and Kevin met in a quiet, isolated area near the evidence room. The place was dimly lit and away from the usual bustle of the main hallways. It was here that the tension between them reached a boiling point. This is a detailed explanation of what was revealed at the beginning because investigation had uncovered more about the case. Eyewitnesses later recalled hearing raised voices in that area. One officer, speaking plainly and without a seed of doubt, said, "I was in the corridor when I heard them arguing. I couldn't make out everything, but it sounded like they were fighting about something important." The simple fact is that an argument had started. From what was gathered, Kevin had said that he was tired of the secret, that he believed it was time for the truth to come out. He felt that they could no longer hide who they truly were. In response, Rick grew more and more agitated, and he insisted over and over that nothing should be revealed. His messages from that night, recovered later by investigators, showed a man desperate to maintain his reputation. Their confrontation escalated quickly. In a moment described by investigators as a flash of panic, Rick produced his service weapon. No one later claimed that there was a prolonged struggle at all. Instead, the moment was over in an instant. A single gunshot rang out and Kevin collapsed on the floor. That one act ended Kevin's life and marked the turning point of the case. That was what a thorough investigation concluded. In the aftermath, investigators worked to piece together the simple yet heartbreaking sequence of events. They recovered text messages that made the whole story plain. One of Kevin's messages read, "I'm done hiding, I want to be free." A reply from Rick coming shortly after said simply, "We can't let anyone know." These messages were just a giveaway. It actually made everything make more sense. The two of them were in a relationship and it was serious. So serious that while one of them wanted the truth to stay hidden, the other one couldn't wait to let the truth out. The investigation was straightforward and officers gathered security footage from the corridor where the argument took place. Although the video was not high quality, it clearly showed the two men in a heated exchange. In the footage, Rick was seen reaching for his gun, and moments later, The sound of a shot was recorded. This simple chain of evidence left little doubt that the shooting was the result of that very confrontation. It was just obvious. Many people couldn't help but call Rick stupid, though. They were not supporting his actions, but they just felt like it didn't make sense that a police officer could be so careless about something as serious as murder. People seemed to wonder why he didn't find any blind spots that the CCTV footage couldn't cover. But then it was later discovered that Rick didn't actually plan to kill Kevin. It happened on the spur of the moment. But at the end of the day, murder is still murder. Colleagues in the station later told investigators that they had suspected something was going on between Rick and Kevin. They recalled noticing small signs like a secretive glance here, a late-night phone call there, but most never spoke up, thinking it was a private matter. However, after the shooting, those whispers became part of the investigation. Simple statements from fellow officers confirmed that the two men had indeed been involved in a relationship that they had worked hard to keep hidden. One officer said plainly, "I always had a feeling something was off. They were too quiet about their personal lives." Though all these people came forward with their opinions and additions to the case, many people felt like it was just bullshit. The two men hid their relationship so well that it's not possible that anyone else knew of them. Family members of the two officers were also interviewed. A close friend of Kevin explained in plain language, Kevin always believed in being honest. He wanted to be open about who he was, even if it meant facing hard truths. He thought that if the truth came out, it might make things better in the long run. In contrast, a family member of Rick noted, Rick was always scared of what people would say. He couldn't risk it. He thought keeping the secret was the only way to protect himself. These simple, heartfelt accounts from those who knew them best reinforced the central conflict: Kevin's desire for truth versus Rick's fear of exposure. Despite all these inputs from family members, some investigators saw it as a facade to keep Rick from going to jail, and to keep Kevin's damaged reputation from being more damaged. In the days after the shooting, investigators continued to build the story in plain, simple terms. They reviewed every text message, every piece of digital evidence, and every statement given by those present that night. All the evidence pointed back to that central issue. It was not a case of premeditated murder or some hidden plot. It was a personal conflict that had spiraled out of control, a fight over whether to live a lie or to face the truth. As the investigation progressed, the clear picture that emerged was one of two men caught in a terrible bind. Kevin felt that living in secrecy was no way to go on, and he was ready to accept the consequences of coming out. Rick, however, was overwhelmed by the idea that their secret could destroy his career and his life. In a moment of pure, unfiltered fear, he made a choice. A very bad choice that he now must live with for the rest of his life. The plain language of the recovered messages and the simple, unadorned statements from witnesses make it clear. Kevin wanted to end the secret, to let the truth shine through regardless of the cost. Rick, on the other hand, could not bear that thought. His actions were driven solely by the fear of what would happen if anyone found out about their relationship. There was no grand scheme, no elaborate plan. It was just a man acting out of terror in a moment of crisis. All this was necessary to the case because a lot of people were interested in knowing what truly transpired between the both of them. It had become a viral case, and the fact that they were police officers meant that they had a lot of people interested in the case. As word of the shooting spread through the department, many officers were left in shock. They had always known that something was hidden beneath the surface, but few expected it to end so tragically. In the days that followed, simple conversations among the officers revealed a deep sense of loss. "It's just so sad," one officer said plainly. The investigation, which lasted for several weeks, relied on basic techniques. Digital experts recovered every text message, and detectives interviewed everyone who might have seen or heard anything. They found nothing to complicate the simple story. Kevin had decided that the secret had to be exposed, and Rick reacted by taking drastic measures. There were no hidden conspiracies or elaborate schemes. They were just two human beings caught in a tragic conflict between honesty and fear. The former suspicion that they were higher-ups involved in the case, or that there was some sort of threat to their lives, was concluded to be a rumor. The police department has to assure the public that there was nothing of that sort going on. Even the physical evidence told a simple story. Security cameras captured the brief encounter between the two men, and the recovered messages left little doubt about what was said. In the end, the tragedy in Charlotte serves as a reminder of the heavy burden that secrets can place on a person. When two people are forced to live a lie, the pressure builds up until it can no longer be contained. In this case, Kevin's determination to be honest clashed with Rick's overwhelming fear, and the result was a single fatal decision. The plain truth of the matter is that this was not a complicated case, but a weird case, and the high cost of hiding who you really are. Kevin wanted to live truthfully, even if it meant risking everything. Rick, however, was so afraid of the consequences that he could not accept the idea of the truth coming out. That fear led him to take a step that changed everything, ending the life of the man he once loved. Though a lot of people were really sad about how things ended, many people concluded that it was just hypocrisy because at the end of the day, everybody knew that nobody would have accepted their relationship, and the fact that they were even in a relationship together would have ruined their careers. This wasn't just any simple relationship. It was a relationship that the both of them were scared of. As the investigation closed, the findings were summarized in clear, simple language. The report stated that the shooting occurred because of a personal conflict over whether to reveal or conceal a forbidden relationship. There was no hidden agenda or external influence, just two officers, each with their own fears and hopes, caught in a moment of crisis. In plain language, the investigation showed that when Kevin's desire for openness met Rick's desperate need for secrecy, the result was a tragic loss. For many, this simple truth is hard to accept, but it serves as a reminder that the cost of keeping secrets can be very high. This case also opened up a discussion among those who work in high-pressure jobs about the need for support when personal issues become overwhelming. Many believe that if Rick had received help and if there had been a way to talk about his fears without the constant pressure to hide, the outcome might have been different. The story is now used as an example of why it is so important to have someone to talk to and why personal struggles should not be ignored. For those who followed the case, the simple lesson is clear. When people are forced to live in fear of being themselves, the consequences can be devastating. Kevin's desire to come clean was met with a reaction fueled purely by terror, and that reaction ended a life. The tragedy of that night in Charlotte shows us that honesty, though difficult, is essential, and that the burden of a hidden truth can become too heavy to bear. In the months and years since the incident, the memory of Sergeant Kevin Miles has served as a solemn reminder of what can happen when personal lives are forced into secrecy. His story, told in plain language and without complicated theories, continues to resonate as a cautionary tale. It is a story that any of us can understand, a story about love, fear, and the desperate choices people make when they feel they have no other way out. To sum it up in the simplest terms, Kevin wanted to live openly, to tell the truth about who he was and who he loved. Rick was terrified of that possibility and did everything he could to keep the secret hidden. That difference in what they believed led directly to the fatal confrontation. There were no elaborate plans, no hidden conspiracies, but just a clash of two very human desires that ended in tragedy. This plain account of the events is meant to serve as a straightforward record of what happened that night. It is not filled with extra details or unnecessary commentary. It is simply a factual narrative. A forbidden relationship was hidden for too long. One man wanted to expose it, and the other was so scared of the fallout that he took a desperate, irreversible step. In doing so, he changed everything. The hope is that by remembering this case in simple, clear language, we can learn the importance of addressing personal struggles before they lead to a breaking point. The tragedy in Charlotte is a reminder that living in fear can have dire consequences, and that sometimes the only way to prevent such outcomes is to be honest with ourselves and with those around us. But aside from everything, we must know that Rick didn't go scot-free, and the fact that they killed a human being was still very much the big problem. Rick tried his best to make sure that he escaped and didn't go to jail. He went as far as trying to see if he could get any benefits because he was a police officer. But the case was not one that was taken with levity. Many people had already taken an interest in the case, and they wanted to make sure that justice was served. The fact that Rick was a police officer did not mean that he was not going to go to jail for killing somebody. In fact, Kevin's family really hated Rick, and according to some eyewitnesses, they even tried to physically attack Rick. They felt like it was not just said that he thought it was okay to kill Kevin when they were both in the relationship together, and it was not like Kevin forced him to date him. Even though the public was showing remorse, and they felt bad that the police officers had to hide their relationship for a long time, Kevin's family made it clear that someone had already lost their life and justice had to be served. They felt like Rick didn't handle the situation well, and he should have managed his anger. Rick, on the other hand, tried to make it seem like it happened in the spur of the moment, and it was not a planned murder. He also tried to make it seem like he didn't have any previous intention to kill Kevin. But Kevin's family felt like he was just lying, and that the murder was premeditated. But even though Rick tried to pull all the strings, it was still clear that he was going to end up in jail for killing Kevin, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. So at the end of the day, Rick was found guilty for Kevin's murder, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment with the option of parole after 10 years. So at the end of the day, Kevin and Rick's love story didn't end up rosy because somebody died and the other person ended up in jail. Even though many people were inspired by what they thought was the perfect secret affair, they couldn't deny the fact that it was never meant to work out.